And with us, we have Mark Toth, National Security and Foreign Policy Expert. Good evening, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Anna, and good evening, Ashim. Good to see you again.
Mark, great to see you too. Thank you. So we've only got a few minutes, but there was one question that's kind of come up over the course of the evening, and that is U.S.-Israeli relations in terms of U.S. policy towards Israel vis-a-vis U.S. policy towards Ukraine. So, for example, there's a commonality. President Biden has asked both countries to exercise restraint, has asked Ukraine not to fire missiles into Russia, and done the same with Israel. But one difference that exists is that President Biden was quite happy to allow Israeli airspace to be protected through the use of American jets, but isn't offering the same to Ukraine. Why do you think that is?
Ashim, that's the million-dollar question. Quickly, though, your math is right. That would have cost Israel about $550 million to defend itself against the attacks, not billions. The difference is somewhat historical. Obviously, Israel and the U.S. relationship goes all the way back to 1948, when President Truman from my home state helped bring about the creation of the State of Israel. Part of it is simply Biden's own political stances over the course of his career. But there is a paradox there, because certainly, as we witnessed on Saturday night, Israel's immense capabilities, this symphony of David's sling and Patriots and arrows and the like, the Iron Dome protected them. But Ukraine is not being afforded the same. And it's escalation fears is what it comes down to. And in my opinion, as you and I have talked going way back into last year, before, those escalation fears by Biden are simply unwarranted. Ukraine deserves the same level of protection that enabled Israel and its allies to protect itself on Saturday from the Iranian attacks.
Well, now the pressure is growing when it comes to helping Ukraine. However, I would like to go back to the beginning of this month. Now, Israel did not claim the responsibility, but also they did not deny that of the killing of 7 Iran senior commanders and military personnel in Damascus early this month, as I said. So, assuming they did it, why did they do it now, as they have a lot on their plate? They have the war with Hamas, world pressure. So why would they do it? Why would they make such a move at this point?
From their standpoint, is a perfect question. From their standpoint, they view Iran as trying to kill Israel with 1,000 cuts. And one of the chief ways they do that is through the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And Zahedi was an important figure in that, not so much a public figure, but certainly an operational figure. And he was behind the attacks on October 7th, the planning of the organization of it and the funding of it. And so Israel, from that standpoint, when they saw the opportunity, no matter what the cost, was going to take him out. They've pledged publicly, and they're doing that, to take out anyone that was involved in the planning of October 7th. For them, it's a bucha. It's not something they're going to lightly turn back on, and they're going to avenge the deaths of the 900 or so Israeli civilians that died on September 7th. So that's where you're seeing it, and I think Israel will continue to do that. Nothing's going to change that calculus, no matter what the ramifications are. They're going to take down the people responsible behind October 7th.
Right. Well, Mark, now, we've seen an added urgency to the passing of the bill that's currently stuck in Congress for the provision of aid to Ukraine and Israel. Do you think Iran's attack on Israel is actually going to finally get this bill passed?
I think it can help. Certainly, it should provide the impetus that's been needed and is way overdue. Clearly, November politics has stalled that bill from getting through in Congress at this point. But now I believe that more and more people in the United States, not just on Capitol Hill, but as I've been reporting at the Hill and the New York Post, more and more people, the public is recognizing this truly is a war of Russia and China, to a lesser extent, against the United States and our allies. And they're seeing those dots being connected now. And Putin benefited greatly by this latest flare-up between Israel and Iran, in the sense that any U.S. diversion of equipment, munitions, et cetera, to the Middle East can't get to Ukraine. So I truly do believe, Ashim, that to your point, we should start to see Congress coalescing and coming together and realizing that both Ukraine and Israeli aid are desperately needed, and needed now.
Now, also, President Joe Biden reportedly told Netanyahu that given the fact that the attack caused the minimum damage in Israel, that Israel should consider the incident a win and just leave it at that. Also, Joe Biden tells Netanyahu not to escalate the conflict with Hamas in Gaza. Now, is Joe Biden relevant anymore to Israel and to Netanyahu? They had close relationship, but is that relationship going to deteriorate if Netanyahu is not even listening to Joe Biden anymore?
All right, Anna, it's a great question. I would characterize the relationship as a prickly one. It always has been. Right now, you've got Joe Biden, understandably, from a narrow political standpoint, focused in on November and what it's going to take to win. And he was pushing, as was Chuck Schumer, the Senate leader on Capitol Hill, for Israel to stop doing what it was doing in the Gaza Strip, in terms of being fully focused on taking Rafah. In a way, in a strange way, Khamenei did Netanyahu a favor. Netanyahu was beginning to be backed into a corner politically by the American reactions to it. Now, it puts, interestingly, Netanyahu in a position where he can go back and say, look, Biden, enough of the political criticisms of me and my government. What do you want? If you want me to stop from not overreacting to what's happening in Iran, then I want you to stop putting these constraints onto me and what I think we need to be doing in Rafah to eliminate Hamas once and for all. Obviously, with the caveat that civilians are protected, humanitarian aid gets in, and the like. Certainly hold Israel responsible for that. So, I think at this point it's interesting. The dynamics just changed because of Khamenei and his decision to attack. And I think it creates more equity now, or more equilibrium now, between Biden and Netanyahu that didn't exist a week ago.
Indeed. It certainly affected the relationship in many subtle ways. Now, I'm going to ask you, as always, Mark, to look in your crystal ball and imagine that this is November, and imagine that Trump has won and is president again. How, he's made many statements about the war in Ukraine and, of course, what's just happened over the last couple of days in the Middle East. What do you think his attitude towards Netanyahu is going to be? I mean, it was pretty good, wasn't it, when he was last in power?
Shame, another $1 million question. Netanyahu and Trump have had a difficult relationship of late. Trump clearly tends to view politics through a personal lens, and he didn't view Netanyahu as fully backing him in some of the criticisms of him. And so he's kind of turned on Netanyahu. So certainly, if Netanyahu is still in power come November, or really technically come January, when a Trump, if he were elected, resumed office, I think that's going to be a difficult relationship. But, my assessment, as I said in The Hill the other day in a column with my writing colleague, John Sweet, Trump can't allow the cult of personality that he tends to try to do to dictate his national security decisions. You can't force yourself on to other countries. National security, both in terms of our own selves as the U.S., but as well as Israel, is far more complicated than that. And it's really going to take Trump coming around to realizing you can't just talk peace. You can't just say it's going to happen. You just can't edict it. It's not going to happen that way. Trump's going to have to get behind Israel's capacity and Ukraine's capacity to win, or Trump's going to find him on the losing end of Putin and Khamenei and the other rogue state actors coming after him, and potentially even Z. So I think Trump will have to have an awakening should he win in terms of the realities, because they've changed dramatically since he left office in January of 2021.
Oh, that's very interesting. I think, well, Trump has a lot on his plate as well. I mean,
Yes,
today
he
he's in
does.
court, so we'll see what happens in November. Well, I would like to go back to the conflict itself, because Israel is not only facing Iran, but also its proxies. And these include Hezbollah in Lebanon, then we have Houthis in Yemen, militia groups in Syria, and Iraq and Hamas, of course, Palestinian Islamic Jihad in Gaza. Now, if they all activate, we know they're active already, but if they all activate, can Israel prevail this? Is it able to do it to prevail this on its own? Because we know that U.S. is not going to help directly. I mean, it helped with shooting down drones and missiles, but that's it. Nothing else is going to happen. What is going to happen with Israel if all the proxies activate at the same time, which might happen if Israel retaliates in days or hours now?
Right. Definitely Israel can and has the capacity. It's important to remember how Israel or the IDF itself, their military is formed. You've got the strategic assets, F-35 stealth fighters, et cetera, that would be used in cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, et cetera, even their submarines that would be used to take on Iran itself, on that front. In terms of Lebanon and Hezbollah, should they do a massive rocket campaign in response to any Israeli retaliation, I suspect you'll see a substantial ground war that happens, and Israel certainly has that capacity. It can do both. It can contain Hamas in the Gaza Strip, and it has more than enough wherewithal to project a ground force into southern Lebanon to put a stop to it. Now, certainly, we would see a lot more damage in Israel. There would be a lot more rockets. It would be a lot more happening. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know. It really probably depends on the nature of Israel's response that seems to be forthcoming. We're seeing a lot of hints that just before I was coming on air, Israeli officials, Israeli media saying that kind of strike is coming. So that will probably trigger a lot of it. And simply, what does Khamenei want all of these groups to be doing? Does he really want the Houthis to get on board, Hezbollah, and Hamas, as well as the groups in Syria and in Iraq? Or does he want to tamp this down and say, enough's enough, I made my point?
Absolutely. Well, so many uncertainties. Mark, thank you as always for giving us such expert opinion, and we look forward to seeing you again shortly. Have a good day, sir.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you, Ashim. Good to see you both.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mark.